Welcome to Child Abuse Awareness with Darlene J. Clark.
Hello, welcome to another episode of Child Abuse Awareness with Darlene J. Clark. The special guest today is Penelope Benis. Y'all have met her previously. Now you get to see her via camera. Hello, Penelope. How are you doing today?
I'm okay. How are you doing, Darlene?
A lot better since we finally got that worked out.
Of a saint. I'm going to call you Saint Darlene from now on.
We got it working though, so it's like, okay, we don't need to pull our hair out, get bald or nothing,
Well, good. On my part.
Yeah. So there's Chris that's here, and he said he's having trouble reading uh, because he broke his glasses. He'll be getting some glasses soon. We'll be praying for you, Chris. Hello, everyone that's in here. Well, Penelope, she's got something very important that she would like to discuss, and we'll introduce you first, okay? Where you can tell that you are trauma informed.
So, yes, my name is Penelope Benis. I'm an adult survivor of child abuse, and I am also trauma-informed trained. What does that mean? Well, we're going to talk about trauma today and a lot of the different elements of trauma. So trauma-informed training is I've been trained to work with people who've experienced trauma, and I've been able to employ some modalities to help others work through and process their trauma through a lot of different, it's a mind, body, spirit approach. So there's a lot of buzz around trauma-informed training now. We'll bring that up during the show, but that is, thank you, my background.
You're quite welcome. And Peggy says hello. Hello, Peggy.
Hello, Peggy. So I will be asking some questions as well, so feel free when I ask a question, I'll pause for a moment. Feel free to fill in an answer if you like. So I'm going to start out with one question. Can anybody guess the average age that a survivor of child abuse who's an adult or who's somewhere entering or into adulthood finally begins to recognize that they have unresolved trauma, begins to recognize they need to go and seek some help and initiate therapy for the healing process? Can you guess what the average age in our country is? If the trauma survivor actually recognizes that they need to go through treatment. So not all humans walking the planet ever get to the point where they resolve their trauma. So this would be if they do, what age?
And I cannot answer that just because of the fact that she told me in a message. Okay, so I cannot answer that. I want y'all to guess what age do y'all believe, okay?
If you can guess. There's
Bucket list says 25.
right. That's a good goal. According to
Bucket list.
According to Child USA, the average age is 52 years old. That means that there are a lot of survivors in our walking around our planet who have unresolved trauma. And again, this is if they go and seek treatment at all. So I want to talk first about really why I'm here today. And I advocate for the adult survivors of child abuse, for the survivors of child abuse who need to process their trauma and healing. And I believe that there needs to be more awareness. Not what I mean by more awareness is more awareness as a large social issue. You can see it in the news. There are a lot of large social issues being addressed currently. I believe a very silent, large social issue is a number of adult survivors, a number of humans in our country and on this planet that are living their lives, living their trauma, and they have not been appropriately diagnosed and appropriately treated for their trauma. So we have, well, let me go into some numbers. And I know you say, oh, numbers, but I think this is really, really important. So in 2024, according to the CDC, 64% of adults in our country had experienced one adverse child experience. And as you know, that's the ACEs. And please let me know if you don't know what the ACEs are. But that would be, for example, in childhood, having a parent that was diagnosed with mental illness, having a parent that was having being subjected to child abuse. Did you want to say, Darlene?
Yeah, some people don't understand, probably never heard what ACEs is. So if you could go over and explain to them what that is.
So ACEs are called to adverse childhood experience. So there was a study done in California where they studied a cohort of young children, and they asked them a series of questions. There were 10 questions based upon had they experienced a certain type of trauma, and this was children from 0 ages to 18, and they had to answer yes or no. So did they have a parent that was incarcerated? Did they experience domestic violence in the home? Did they experience child abuse in the home? Did they have a parent that was diagnosed with a mental illness on a DSM-5? Did they have a parent that was a drug addict or an alcoholic? Did they experience a divorce in the childhood? So those are 7 of the 10, but these are significant childhood traumatic events. And so the screening was done for ACEs, the study was done, and they looked at the impact of even having a child experience one adverse childhood event in their lifetime, the impact on the child's life in terms of depression, anxiety, and a lot of manifestations that we see in a lot of trauma survivors. How these children fared basically in terms of being able to develop into healthy, adjusted children. And it was found that even if children had one adverse childhood event, it really did significantly impact their development, their psychosocial development. So, Darlene, do you think that describes the ACE enough to where people can understand what I'm referring to?
Yes, I think they understand. Do y'all understand? If y'all do, please put a 1 in the chat. But I think you did very well talking about the adverse. And sometimes people might not understand. Some people might think, well, even if you're not abused, but they don't really understand a lot of times, even the verbal abuse and the child neglect, and that plays a big role in it as well.
Even, and thank you for saying that, even witnessing abuse.
Yes.
So you don't even have to be the recipient of the abuse, but witnessing the abuse is as impactful as being directly the recipient of the maltreatment.
See, like if your spouse, like your husband, is abusing you and your children are right there, and you're saying, well, at least they're not being abused, but they really are, because they are impacted by seeing and witnessing it, what's going on here.
Exactly. In fact, I've learned in my own education that in some instances, children that observe the abuse, it's even more impactful for them than the person who's actually been abused in terms of the basically how penetrating the trauma is. So that's, it's very eye-opening, and I will maybe, Darlene, what we can do is I can link the ACEs study to this YouTube when we're done with the live session, so that people can go and refer to it.
Thank you.
But here's the point, and we're talking about adults survivors of child abuse who are walking around with undiagnosed mental illness and really unresolved trauma. So if 64% of adults in the United States last year, according to CDC, had experienced one adverse childhood event before the age of 18, can you guess how many Americans in our country have experienced sexual abuse as an ACE? This is
Okay, yeah, I'm just thinking back with the ACEs on my story, and y'all know my story. It's like, dang, everything was in burst child reaction back then. It's like there was nothing hardly positive, but there was some positive, like I did say about the hospital thing and a couple other, incidences. But can you imagine how traumatic? And have you ever heard the phrase that people say, well, how could you really remember something like that when you're 2 year old, right? Well, I had spoke to somebody and they said, well, your brain actually takes a picture when something traumatic happens, okay? And then it stores away, but you never know when that memory might, or that photograph in that mind, your mind would end up coming back up and showing you this thing that happened to you. You never know. So these people that say, well, why didn't you bring it up before? Because really they don't know until it crops back up and shows them.
That's really interesting. I never heard it put that way. It takes a picture. It's like a picture. It kind of reminds me, if you think of that carousel slides from the olden days, right? It's a slide in a carousel that's going to come around at some point. It's filed. It's filed away. The way you described it, Darlene. That's just really impactful.
She's asking 75 more. What you talking about? The 75 more? Is it types of abuse? Is that what you're referring to, or what?
Of how
Let's see. But
million,
it says 7.
oh, let's see here. One in four. Let me see if I. Oh, good. Okay, 1 in 4 children. So let's talk about. Yeah, let's talk about. And I know I'm throwing statistics. I always say with statistics and child maltreatment, child abuse, sexual child abuse. I always say they're completely underreported. So I think it's always a higher number. It's according to Child USA, I believe, or child.org. It's 1 in 3 girls before the age of 18 and 1 in 5 boys before the age of 18 will experience sexual abuse. And in 2024, per the CDC, so this is actually documented, and I think this is an underreported number, there were 42 million American adults who'd experienced sexual abuse. And that's of the ones that are reporting. And that's of the ones that were also surveyed. So I think we know that it's more. But here's,
Yes, because mine was not even reported, and my sister Savina's was not reported. There's so many that goes not reported. And look at the people that do tell their families and say, you're bad, but please, the suicide rates today with all the people, the PTSD, no, it's never your fault. It is the perpetrator's fault who is doing this to you.
absolutely, absolutely. But as you mentioned, we either file away that picture, somewhere in the carousel. There's a lot of, we discussed this during your show, Darlene, a couple weeks ago. Children as a survival mechanism dissociate. So dissociation, not disassociation. Let's see here. Yeah, it is so sad. Disassociation is a spectrum, and it is basically a child will block out or numb or an event. In fact, there's disassociation or dissociation rather through depersonalization, where a child will actually, during an abusive event, will actually leave their body. They will actually leave their body, and they will, as if they will float up, look over the scene. They'll be able to hear and see, but they will not be able to feel. They will completely go numb and leave their bodies just to survive. What used to be termed multiple personality disorder on the spectrum of dissociation is now called DID, dissociative identity disorder, where in terms of a child dissociating or someone who's experiencing extreme trauma dissociating, the trauma is so severe the person actually splits, their personality splits. And it used to be, like I said, it used to be called multiple personality disorder. So they split into different parts. So I know, Darlene, we've talked about it, but to your point, so many children are afraid to tell, or it gets filed away like that picture, or they completely dissociate, and they numb it out. And their mind, that, their body can go numb, but their mind can also go numb, where they just, and you've also heard this term, they'll repress the memory. So I believe that with all these numbers that we're going to talk about today, about all of these, children and adults that have experienced trauma that have not yet processed through it, I still think the numbers are greatly underreported, because according to childprotect.org, for every incident of child abuse that's reported, an estimated 2 incidents go unreported. So to me, that tells me of all these numbers that we're only looking really at a third of, we're only getting a third are being reported. That means 2/3 are not. So I think you can, times 2, times 3. You can look at these numbers and say times 3. I think the numbers are what I'm saying is I think that they're way bigger than we know.
Yeah, look at all these neglect stories we hear recently, and these children are dead. And they said, well, they wouldn't even, no one called CPS or nothing. And these kids, some of them a year old, some of them 2 years old, some of them are not even supposed to be school age, and they never even put them in school. And nobody called nobody on anything and reported. So they were way under the radar. And I know that nobody reported us because of the fear. They feared my dad.
And that is a great point. I know we have mandatory reporters, even now, but if we're not focused on it as a huge issue, if this issue is not taking center stage, and if there aren't all eyes being aware of it and looking at it and bringing the visibility and the accountability to it, it's going to, I always say, right, Darlene, silence is the most prolific enabler of abuse to continue. We have to raise the awareness across the board to not only screen children, but to screen adults. But why is, what you're saying, why is everything going unreported? Why are so many cases of child abuse, sexual abuse not being reported? Because all the eyes aren't on it, or there's not a mandate. There's not a mandate across the board to report on it, to do something about it.
When I talk to different people, and like recently I said, well, there was a kid that ended up, a neighbor heard the screaming, and it was a teenager in the house, and they were walking their dog, and they reported him. And I said, but thank God for this person just walking by and was hearing this child being abused, that they reported it. do you know how many people that when I try to share the story about the people that told, how many said people just need to mind their own business? No, that's the problem. They're minding their own business, and you might be that child's only hope for survival.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. If you, the saying is, if you see something, say something. It's all of our responsibility to do it. We have to. Exactly. Um, Unfortunately, in a 2023 child maltreatment report by CWLA, only 50% of children that are actually taken in and right, children that actually go to a provider or to a service to receive help and treatment, only 50% receive it. So these are of the reported cases. So we know that there are so many cases that are not reported, millions and millions. 1 in 3 are only reported. And of the 1 in 3 that are reported, only 50% of those children actually receive treatment, which is, and I'm going to read this, which is, yeah, folks did turn their heads. So here's my question. And I know that we're adult survivors. You know, Darlene and I met through the adult survivor community. We're right now talking about some statistics. We're talking about how many adult survivors are out there that have experienced sexual abuse. We're talking about children and the numbers of children that whose abuse isn't reported, and of the abuse that is reported, 50% receive treatment. But here's the question: is anybody wondering? And this comes down to you and me and other adult survivors, Darlene. Is anybody asking, well, whatever happened to those kids who never got help, right? Whatever happened to them? How did their lives go, right? Were they able
It's
to develop healthy, adjusted adults? Is anybody asking the question of all
exactly.
the sexual cases that went under the radar, that everybody turned their heads the other way? Is anybody asking the question, how their life turned out? What was their road like? As I said, did they develop into healthy, adjusted adults? I mean, I don't think anybody's asking that question, and I think that's a huge, huge problem.
Even if you turn into a healthy, adjusted adult, there's going to be times when you have setbacks because sometimes the memories come back and they'll slap you in the face. No matter how well adjusted you are, those old memories will still, make you doubt yourself at times too.
Absolutely. I mean, there are, and Darlene, we've talked about our stories, but I was a little. First of all, I'm very fortunate because I was able to. I was very close to my primary care provider. I've been seeing my primary care provider for years. That provider knew me very, very well. And I really started to struggle in my mid 40s. And if you would have asked me, were you abused? How was your life growing up? I would have just said, no, I wasn't. My life was, everything was fine. Everything was fine. Well, two things about that. Number one, when you are born and you grow up in an abusive environment, I honestly thought that was normal. I didn't know that families operated any differently. So to me, that was normal. And I didn't consider my childhood and all my aces. By the way, I scored 9 out of 10, 8 out of 10. I didn't realize that there was anything unusual about that.
Yeah, I thought everybody was done that way. So you thought the same way that I did then, because like why are we put here just to suffer? That's really the kind of questions I was asking a lot of times when
Yeah,
I was living through it. Why were we put here just to suffer? Everybody's treated this way, every kid. And I'm glad to know that I was wrong. And yeah,
right.
thanks for saying that, Peggy. Indeed, more people should be thinking about, what about how are they doing today? How are they surviving? I mean, when you mentioned that, Penelope, about, you think of all these cases and you see the cop stepped in, arrest a parent, and all this other kind of stuff. How is a kid doing today having lived through that, right? How are the kids? It's well and good that these people got arrested. Are they self-adjusted? Are they put with more predators? Are they being abused where they were sent to? Are they loved? Are they taken care of? Are they called stupid? Are they telling you just go to your room, just go over there and watch TV, let the TV be your babysitter, instead of having a bond with the kids, and showing them that spending time with them matters, listening to them, hugging them, comforting them, feeding them, different things like that, just showing that they are a joy and they are loved, that don't keep continue treating them like they're not wanted or they're so bad, that they don't deserve anything good in their life. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. To your point, are we asking the question, are these children struggling or all these adults struggling? And we should be asking that question. We should be looking for it. And if they're struggling, instead of punishing or treating the symptoms, we need to ask why. So we need to ask why. So I was saying that my primary care provider knew me well, saw me struggling. I was about 46 years old, and said to me, and I was very lucky because my provider knew me well. You cower when you're bullied. I was being bullied at work by a tyrannical boss, and said you should look into that. He picked up on something. So I want to make a point of that it was my primary care physician, and I went into my appointments. Now I know not everybody has access or can afford, but a lot of us can. So because somebody knew me well, my primary care provider said, think you ought to explore that, and recommended a psychologist for me to go and meet with. That began the beginning of my healing process. That was 9 years ago. So now I'm aging myself, right? So I was lucky in that it was noticed, and I was lucky to start the process. I was very lucky. So I'm one of the adults. I'm under the 52. I was under the 52 years old. I was 46, but I was lucky enough to start the process. I wonder today, if that provider hadn't said something to me, if I would still be struggling. What did struggling look like for me? Well, I knew something was wrong. I couldn't tell you what. I collapsed. I had a full-time job. I had a husband. I had 3 young boys that were in middle school. One was starting high school. And I was crawling up my stairs, and I didn't know why. I was crawling. And I knew I was in pain. I was in a lot of pain, physical, but I couldn't tell where. So I was still, my whole body was numb. But I hit a wall. And that's just a sub point of unresolved trauma. So
I'm sorry you endured that. Bullying does affect you, and so that probably had the stipulations of the bullying during the abuse and stuff. Because really, child abuse, that's a lot of bullying going on, and that's adults bullying a child when they're doing all that. It's a
well,
major forms of a bullying.
really, but I think that was just, I think that my cowering when I was bullied was just sort of a behavior that was noticed. I think that I was crawling up this, if I had from birth, I had all, like yourself, Darlene, when you have so many traumatic experiences, and you're swallowing them, right? And you're burying that trauma, they just compound and compound and compound. And I mean, I was just carrying all this, right? Carrying all of this. And so let's talk about that as well. And I want to actually read this comment that just came up.
He's got a good question. Moonlight's got a very good question.
Right. That's a great question. So I want to make a point, Moonlight, of that question. If you suspect a child, 8-year-old male, is being molested, but the child is physically aggressive and violent towards you and another student, any advice? Here's always don't, I always say, we tend to punish, right? We tend to just react. I think you need to peel back the onion and ask why. Why is this child acting like this? You obviously suspect this child's being molested, so there's something going on there that you automatically suspect, and you must, there must be something underlying there. I would say go with your intuition. But children don't, most of the time, misbehave for no reason at all. So children act out, right? For a reason. They're calling for attention, something's going on, and it's really a cry for help. So I think what we need to start doing is stop punishing and reacting to the symptoms or the behavior. I think we need to go and ask why. So this gets me to the point that really what I want to make about children, about adults, about that question I asked about, has anybody ever wondered, how those children that, live through child abuse and sexual abuse were doing as adults? Were they struggling in their life? We need, as a community, to press upon, whether it's legislation or our healthcare systems, we need to screen every child, every adult, everybody who is going into an incarceration situation, everybody who's admitted to the emergency room. We need to screen them for trauma. We need to screen them for sexual abuse. They need to be screened. We need to have them screened. And I think the easiest way to have them screened is through the healthcare system. But I think that child, if you suspect it, that child needs to go to the doctor and be screened. There needs to be a screening done. I don't know if that's something, Moonlight, that you can make happen. I always, with my own children, I always thought, I'd rather run them to the doctor. I'd rather run them to a professional and have it be nothing than not do it and have it be something. So to me, your question and the behavior of the child suggests that something needs to be investigated. When I say investigate, I don't mean send out the authorities. I mean take the child to the doctor and have the doctor assess for sexual abuse, or refer for psychiatric psychological services if possible. I would say investigate and ask the question why, and get that question answered. So again, my mantra was always, I'd rather act on something and have it be maybe nothing than not act on something and have it be something. I hope that makes sense. But I think a lot of the times, children are acting out. I was acting out at a very young age. Well, there was a reason for that, right? But every time I acted out, I got disciplined more harshly. So no one ever asked, well, why is she acting out? It was, she's acting out, let's deal with her. So we noticed something in the pictures the child draws on their own and work with. Yeah, children don't come up. Yes, children are exposed to a lot more on the internet these days, but I think children are, I think we all live our trauma. I think we do in ways maybe we don't. I think a child that is 8 years old that's drawing in a workbook is exposed to something and is actually putting the words to paper. And maybe the child has access. Okay, so say it's just the child has not just access to pornography. An 8-year-old should not have access to pornography. Children that are, I don't know all the time if the definition of sexual abuse and molestation is actually understood. Not saying that you don't understand it, but let me explain. Yes, there are sexual acts. There are sexual innuendos. There's inappropriate touching. But showing a child pornographic pictures is sexual abuse. Touching a child's privacy is sexual abuse. So let's see here. Okay, there was another comment. So
Could I say something about that?
yeah.
So when you go to speak to the child, be careful on the way you talk to them, Because if it ever goes to court or something, they'll say you planted this idea into your child, okay, into the child. So be careful to go roundabout ways and finding out what's actually wrong with the child. Show them that they matter in their life and they could come to you with any kind of problem. So no need to hurt. Just please come and talk to us when you know we are safe to talk to. We're not going to hurt you. It's okay if you're upset. It's okay if you feel like crying. It's okay for you to be angry, whatever was done. But please feel free to come to us. We don't want another statistic of possible suicide or anything that like that with a kid holding it in because that's what's going on in our society today. There's so many suicides. There's so much were to blaming themselves and stuff. It's very tremendous. And so when I was looking at some things earlier on how to recognize some of the signs of abuse in toddlers and little babies and stuff, there's bite marks and there's reverting to here's some of the signs, okay? Reverting to outgrown behaviors, being overly submissive or aggressive, and a lack of attachment to a caregiver are signs of emotional abuse. Signs of physical abuse include unexplained injuries, bruises, bites, scratches, etc., fear of caregivers, and sudden changes in behavior. The children who have been sexually abused may have inappropriate knowledge of sex, fear physical touch, and have trouble sitting and walking. But everybody's different, as we know, so we can sit back and they might. They will have trouble communicating. They don't know how to talk about what's really inappropriate. They feel dirty. They feel nasty. They withdraw. They don't know how to express all this internal thing that's going on with them.
Also,
So remember to be patient.
shame is a huge silencer as well. Shame and embarrassment. You're right, darling. Shame. Shame
Some
is.
some kids even get threats like if you tell we're going to harm this person, okay?
I would also, that's a great list, Darlene. Great list. I would also add bedwetting. Like you said, regressive behaviors. Bedwetting's a big sign. And I also appreciate your point, Darlene, about especially when it comes to children under the age of 18 or any child. You're right. We have to be very careful about the process if the child is being abused, sexually abused, or physically. We have to be very careful about actually how we interact with the child so that the child can speak in its own words. I would again suggest this, if this child is 8, so this child's 8 years old, I believe this child must be in school unless the child's homeschooled. 8 years old, still elementary school. School districts have social workers. I know that they're spread thin. Even social workers are very adept at working at these situations. So if you can't get the child to a physician or to a helping professional like a psychologist, I would say schedule a meeting with the school social worker that they can be very helpful to, and they know the process and they have the tools in order to kind of go through the process correctly. Because Darlene's point is a good one. The worst, we don't jeopardize a child's, you know, um, process by inserting our own words. And even though we want to make it easier for them and we want them to feel comfortable and safe about talking to us about it, we also don't want to jeopardize their path if that's the path that they can go down.
I got a few questions for Moonlight also. So are you a teacher in that school and this is one of the students? That's what I'm wondering since you're seeing them at school, seeing the person at school. Also, what do you have, if you had known him prior, what was his persona like before, prior to all this, right? And do you start making records of the different behaviors that he did before and make a record of each day of his behavior that you noticed. Make sure that you had the date and time and the names of the teachers and the things that these had happened to. So keep a record. That's very important.
Agreed. I know that office, child care medical offices are doing a very good job now screening them more for depression and anxiety. But I still don't feel and believe that all that screening actually can screen for trauma.
Exactly.
Trauma is a very different animal. And Darlene, so you touched on some of the manifestations in children of child abuse and sexual child abuse, physical abuse, even mental, emotional abuse. Let's talk about adult manifestations as well.
So I would tell Moonlight to reach out. I'm also at Facebook under Darlene J. Clark if you want to hit us up, because we want to continue on seeing if there's any which way that we can find more answers to the solution. I'd like to hear more and try to help out whatever we can and whatever knowledge that you can. Make sure that you come together, maybe other teachers come together and see what they may have seen and heard as well. Okay. So make sure, because no telling what's going on with this child. Excuse me. No telling what all's going on with this child, and there could be some bad things going on at home. He might be reaching out for help, but that your place might actually be the one place he feels safe. But like you said, the drawings says a lot. The kid does a lot in the drawing work. So you might need to, do you have a school counselor that you're talking to also and get her take on it? Um, Maybe if there's some other people that could get involved also that are very experienced with this. So without naming names, you talk to the person, like child therapist or something, because you will not need, for a HIPAA violations, you have to be careful about mentioning names. You don't want to be accused of said. Um, you want to be the best advocate for this child that you can be. Thank you.
Yes, I would also say school social worker. School districts have social workers. I think they need more social workers because I know that they're spread very thin, but a social worker is another great avenue in a school system to um, get some focus on this child. So that's what I would recommend as well.
Before you go on, I wanted to tell people what that thing is on the left side of my screen. That's a little QR code. If people scan that, they're able to get my book, with that QR code at the top left corner.
And I would say you're going to want to read Darlene's book because if you thought she was amazing, and she is, you will be amazed at how amazing she truly is. She's an amazing person, and you are the epitome of resilience and hope and healing.
But thank you so much. God brought me through it.
Okay. Yeah. So, but I think the point is, and this is what you're asking, what to do. Here's the point. We got to do something. Do something. And you're doing something. We have to do something. So we have to do something, I think, to screen children. And we have to do to screen adults for trauma. I know that there are California, the Surgeon General, Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris, was very instrumental in the study and actually doing trauma screening. She mandated it. She mandated that there's a mandate through that, for state by state, that all healthcare providers, and it's actually extending into schools, become trauma-informed trained so that they can identify if they believe that there's been trauma within a student. Here's why this is so important. We're talking about a lot of behaviors, and we're talking about behaviors in children in terms of regression and acting out, bedwetting, things like that. But adults have symptoms as well. And Because abuse, especially child abuse that has been unprocessed, any trauma that has been really repressed, it, the old adage of, what you don't know would hurt you is not true. It will manifest in other ways. For example, and I don't know, Darlene, if you experience this, but adult survivors of child abuse, sexual child abuse will experience pelvic pain. Men have a higher incidence of prostate cancer, self-neglect, depression, anxiety, drug abuse, alcoholism, obesity, eating disorders, promiscuity, high incidence of re-victimization, struggles with interpersonal relationships, homelessness. So, and I think our society is very good at treating. We treat symptoms. But again, the question is, the call to action is, we've got to ask why. If you're treating the symptoms, you're not getting to the problem. And the problem, and I mentioned do we ask the question, whatever happened to those children who experienced abuse, sexual abuse, that became adults, how did their life turn out? Did they develop into healthy, adjusted adults? If these, if we are struggling as adults with any of these things I just mentioned, and then there are many, many more, these are symptoms. These are symptoms. We have to stop treating symptoms. We have to look at the root of the problem. And I believe that the root of the problem, the best way to get through the problem is to screen for trauma. If I had been given the ACEs study, even in college, my life would have turned out a lot differently in terms of me actually realizing that there was something that I needed to work on. I mean, Darlene, can you imagine? So I started at 46 in my healing process. I don't want to ask you your age, but when you started getting help, think about the age that you were, right?
Right.
That came before that, and what life would be like. I mean, even though it would be ideal just to eradicate child abuse and sexual abuse and child maltreatment, but I know we can't. That's coming, I hope. But in the interim, what would life be like if I would have been able to address this in my early 20s, in my late teens, even earlier? Can we get earlier intervention? So I think everybody needs to be screened.
And know too that a lot of times you might be with a spouse who don't give you, what you need in defending you, protecting you. Not, and if you're still with a spouse that harms you, and then everybody says it's okay, he could go ahead and do all that. It's not. But see, even though I was in therapy, the therapy wasn't doing me much good because I was at home and I was getting abused still by my husband, right? So once I got away from that abuse, okay, and then I started shutting family members out of my life who said, well, it's best, it's God's punishment to you for being a bad girl. So that's why the SA happened to you even at age 2, the sexual abuse and the violence and the neglect was because it's your punishment being a bad girl. See, we all know that's lies, but the thing about it is you got to get the negative people out of your life or you're not going to get anywhere with your life. You can do it. If I did it and got these negative people out of my life, y'all can do it as well.
But that's a journey to get to that point, isn't it, Darlene?
Yes, yeah, it is. Because at times you're stuck in that situation, like if you're a spouse, you're a woman, and like the church, like I was going to, you let the man provide for you. You got to do what he says or whatever. Oh, but you're such a bad person. You ought to let him go ahead and kill you. That's your only way to heaven. You had to leave all that mindset. Man, that was so hard. That was so hard because it was so negative all the time, right? That's not of God. That's not God what God wants. But these people were falsely doing these and acting like they knew a lot more than God does because God is not one that's full of hate. He don't like people to be harming the children or harming the women. You're right there as a helpmate. You're not there to be beat down or hit or abused or called bad names or be victimized, and so many people that's been murdered at the hands. And this happens to guys too, don't get me wrong, because some men get violated by the women, and we're pulling for y'all. We are. We'll help you out. We'll discuss with you. We'll be there to support you. There's too many guys, and you know what? Number one problem I noticed that men have asked when they were sexually abused as boys, right? They questioned their own sexuality when a guy had been the one that raped them. It tore on their hearts so bad. They was like, am I gay now? You know what I mean? They was like, am I gay? Like, it's like, and it really does mess with the mindset, and it's a constant struggle. So these people can really manipulate, and there's still some friends of mine that's battling today, and the people are telling her, well, you would have never, it's your fault that the person kidnapped you and took you over to the house and then passed you around to these other men. You were willingly. No, it is not her fault, people. People, please stand with your kids. Protect your kids, please. Don't keep blaming the kids. Reprimand your family members who's touching your child. Why are you right there going like that, supporting somebody that will harm a child in the first place, who thinks sexually of a child? Why do you still have them in your life to continue? You choose them over your own child. That is sick, that is vile, and it's disgusting. And I'll be quiet for a little while.
I know, man. We need we need to be angry about what's happening with children and abuse. We need to be angry about what's happening about the lack of accountability. We have to be angry about what's happening to the adults that walk this planet that never received help. We need to be angry about the fact that there's so much struggling, and there's so much darkness, and there's so many problems. I mean, every single person. So here's the point about struggling. Okay, we need to be passionate about this. We need to be angry about this, because that anger and that passion, and anger used in the right way, can be constructive. That fuels us to do something and take action and do something. So don't ever apologize for being passionate. Of course we have to be fired up. I mean, I'm fired up. That we're not screening, we're not screening for trauma. We're not screening for children. We're not screening adults. I always want the adults come second, the children come first, and that's fine. Why are we not screening for trauma? Why?
That's what I'm so proud of, that assistant teacher that seems to be screening right now and using her own, what she's doing. And I'm so proud of that assistant teacher coming in here and bringing this problem to light, because this is a teacher that is aware of a problem possibly happening. It's best to be safe than sorry.
Exactly. Exactly. Better be safe than sorry. Exactly. I mean, I have 3 sons, as I mentioned. They've had lots of broken bones in their lives. Whenever they had to go, to the hospital, children's hospital, for a very badly broken bone, they always pulled the parents into a room and they asked us exactly how it happened. And then they asked the child how it happened. And I knew that they were looking for abuse, and I appreciated it. That is what should be happening. Talking about struggling, Darlene, by the way, I'm looking at just some statistics, because I like my statistics.
Right.
So, according to childprotect.org, 80% of 21-year-olds who abuse children met the criteria for at least one psychological disorder. Once they reported 84% of participants that had experienced child physical abuse had a history of at least one psychiatric disorder. When we're abused, do we struggle? Yes. To me, we do. Talk about suicide. 81% of adults who attempt suicide reported a history of child abuse. You had mentioned suicide earlier, suicide attempts. We have to screen for trauma. We have to screen for trauma. We have to make that a priority because we have to, as a society, two things. We have to give people permission to bring it up. We have to give them the latitude to work on their traumatic experience in terms of healing. We have to get it up and out. If we don't get it out, we become depressed. If we don't get it out, we may become suicidal. We get it out. And to me, the most important, another really important point, and actually I want to know what people think. Do you think as a state mandate, as a federal mandate, we have to screen children through old age, from cradle to grave, for trauma? If looking for trauma becomes just normal operating procedure, don't you think that might make an impact on the number of children who are abused if the abusers know that there's a microscope on it now? And I want to know if anybody wants to write it in the chat what your thoughts are on that. Because I think it serves two purposes to start screening for trauma. Not only to initiate healing early on, but I think an increased focus and a microscope is going to have there's going to be a notice that is given about the fact that these things are not going to be swept under the carpet anymore. They're going to be highlighted. We're going to be looking for it. We're going to be screening for it. We're going to be dealing with it. So I want to know everybody else's thoughts on that.
I really believe that's a good idea. We need to be screening, and then sometimes, have you ever walked through, a lot of times you're walking through a grocery store, right? And you notice a woman and a child, right? I got a bad habit of watching the mama and the child a lot, okay? I watch their inner reactions, and you know how common and it is when I see one that's actually taking care of the daughter or the son or whatever, the baby, but sometimes I walk around and she's not paying much attention, and I'm like, I'm just walking around making sure I'm looking at the other people surrounding to make sure there's no predators around. And then I usually tell people, say, hey, it's okay. I'm a child abuse advocate. Um, and I'm just looking around watching to make sure there ain't other people around the area while you're turning around looking at the items. I'm helping, trying to protect your child. And she says, thank you. And then I go on my way and walk away. And needless to say, she's following me all over the store now. And I kind of laugh about that, thinking about, well, wow. But there's been another instance where I seen this mother and she had her arms wrapped around the little boy's neck, and he had to be 10 years old, and she was swearing him down. That's why I can't take you anywhere. You can't now. You're not going to be able to eat this, and you're not going to be able to do this, all because you're misbehaving and you come walk in that store and you're wanting these items and stuff. You're not going nowhere ever again, and all this other kind of stuff. And I thought, oh well. And I stopped right there. I didn't not mean cussing, and I just said, "What the hell?" Just slipped out of my mouth like, "What the hell?" I stopped dead in my tracks. I looked right at her and said, "What the hell?" You know, and she froze like that for a long time. So then I went up to the cash register and told the cashier, I said, please keep a watch on her. I've got to leave the store because I think she's abusing her child. So please keep a watch on her. And if she does anything other when I leave, please call the police. And she said, yeah, I'm noticing I'm on high alert now because I was abused as well.
Wow. Wow. It's interesting, isn't it, Darlene? The more we start talking about abuse and our own experiences and are open about it, don't you find that it gives other adults permission to talk about it as well? I mean, the minute you
Yes.
just, it's, that reminds me of a story. I was in Costco many years ago, and I went to, this is when Costco still had a photo center inside, and I went to go pick up some pictures, and then I picked up some pictures, and I was literally on the other side of the store from the photo booth, and the woman working behind the photo booth, the Costco employee, tracked me down and found me, because I guess they had found 3 more pictures in a little unlabeled envelope. And just the fact that she tracked me down and found me for 3 little pictures, I mean, how many people would do that? So we just started talking. And I don't know how we got into the conversation, but we did. That, and I don't know why, I don't know how it came up, but we were talking about both of us being adults who have child abuse. She started talking about her own abuse. And then
Wow.
something else. So then I started talking to her about the fact that I was becoming involved as an activist, and that I was realizing there's a community for adult survivors and there are a lot of resources. Then she said this. She said, and this is, so I have to put some context in this. Costco, I think a lot of us know what Costco is. I'm from Washington State, so I was actually at the Issaquah, Washington Costco, and Issaquah, Washington is where the Costco headquarters is. So they've got a
Wow.
and they've got the corporate buildings right next to it. So, there's a lot of corporate people that come in. Here's what she said to me. She said, do you know how many of my colleagues here at Costco that I talk to? There are so many of us that have been abused as children. There are so many of us. And I thought, this is just the fact that we started talking about it, the fact that here I am at Costco, and literally you could hold a seminar at Costco for the employees who were adult survivors of child abuse, who were just beginning amongst themselves to talk about it. And that really
Wow.
me, as there's so many, and I know we're talking about children too, but as adults, there's just so many full-grown adult survivors, or full-grown adults who are walking around this earth. And maybe we have processed some of the trauma and the abuse, maybe we haven't. But do we have a place to go and talk about it? You do on your show, right? This is a vehicle for that. This is a platform for
Right.
that. But how many people are walking around still isolated or struggling? Are they talking to their healthcare providers? So it really just struck me, like what you said. You're in a store, you're talking to the cashier, someone in the store, about a child that you're suspecting. Well, the store employee is also suspecting. Of course, we know as adult survivors of child abuse, we've got this intuition, right? We have this intuitiveness where we can sense it, we can see it, we can pick it up from a mile away. There's this spidey sense that we have, but it is so prevalent. It is so prevalent. I don't know why we haven't screened for trauma. There's no mandate why.
And
But
see, then when I, then later on when I remembered, I said, I seen these 2 kids before, and they played in McDonald's in a little play area, and not several years back, there was these adult kids. I was playing with the young kids in there, and I really believe this was the 2 kids because she had a sister. He had a sister in the next aisle. So they were trying, and the mother said, watch my kid for a little while I go in the bathroom. That was a big mistake. Okay. So when she did that, or, and then it's either that or she went to go get a soda, right? And let the kid right there playing. But that couple and the 2 kids were walking out the door with her kid? And I found out that it's got to be the same people. And I'm like, oh my gosh, well, I'm remembering that. Yeah, I've seen these people before. And that's the people that actually right here trying to kidnap your kids. You know how that hits you when you're like, it dawned on you, oh, that's the same people that was trying to sway these kids and kidnap them outside with using the kids as employees. So y'all be careful. Y'all might think that these older kids are safe around your kids, but watch whoever you're with, you know. And there was that other incident with that predator that kept walking around the square, and he had a ankle bracelet on for a while. And the next time I seen, he was there. He didn't have an ankle bracelet. Two little girls got out of the car. The mom was driving. She was busy getting her stuff out of the car. The oldest girl that had to be about 10, 11 years old, 10, 11, 12, something like that, and she went running to him and she was hugging all over him and everything. And I asked her, I said, why are you doing this? And the mama got close at this time so she could hear what I'm saying. Why are you doing this? This is a sex predator. Why are you hugging him? And she goes, well, I go to my friends every night and I'm at her house and we're hung up every time. And her mama said, do what? So it's lucky that I was around these situations to bring awareness to some of these, like I hope to God the mother never let that child go back over there to that friend's house where the predator was grooming that child, getting ready to probably pounce to do something with her, but still holding her every night. And she said, even up underneath the covers, while watching TV. You know how sick and disgusting when I found, heard that part? So y'all, you're trusting your friends. You're saying, well, that's a good family, but you don't know if they're letting a predator over there either. You don't know if they know that that other person coming over is a predator or not. So really keep a watch over your kids by all means.
Parents need to be diligent. And I think it's a real challenge now. It's not impossible, but it's a challenge because of, the internet and social media. Our children are more vulnerable than they've ever been before because there's so many different ways to, to groom our children, access to our children. So, Darlene, I know you probably know of Darkness to Light. I've never worked with children directly, but yet, but I know Darkness to Light has some very good programs about how to educate parents and really how to talk to their children and how to address this issue. But I think in terms of parenting, it's a very, very good idea to get some education on this. I mean, my son's in college, so we were sort of on the cusp of this whole thing. So we sort of at the tail end. They were, older, quite a bit older, but now when I have grandchildren, it's a whole different ballgame. Of course, grandchildren are a ways off, but I think it's really important.
And I wanted to tell people also, even though I'm no longer with that organization, it does have a lot of pertinent information at their website, which is NASCA.org, National Association of Adult Survivors of Child Abuse.org. You go there and you can find a lot of pertinent information, some news articles, some statistics as well.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure that I think we can continue doing and elaborating on different avenues and aspects on abuse through different talks too, because it's a wide array of a lot of problems there.
Yes. Another child abuse advocate that I know will literally take like one point in one article, and she can talk for 2 hours on that one point. I mean, we have so much to talk about. There's so much to talk about with this issue, whether it's children or adults. But I think there's a lot of hope in this as well, because I know we've talked a lot about a lot of the problems, but the hope is that healing is possible. And you see, Darlene, you've heard the story. Healing is possible, but it's very important. Also, Darlene, if it's okay if I just make note, because there are some movements right now across our country.
Yes.
Look at trauma screening. So if I could just talk a little bit about that.
Yes. And I want to say something before you get started, too. I want to tell people that it's not politically, okay? It's not Democrat, it's not Republican or nothing. It's evil against good.
Yeah, this is not partisan. This is not political. This is that's why I said this is a massive social issue facing our country, and actually it involves our entire universe. You know, child abuse does not discriminate geographically or culturally or socioeconomically. It's
Exactly.
everywhere. Um,
Exactly.
so we talked about the ACEs, the average child experience screenings. So those are starting in certain states to be mandated, which is great. I mean, if we can screen our children young while they're still school aged and young in the single double digits, um, that can actually be a great identifier of children that are being abused. But there's also SAMHSA, which I don't know if you've heard about. It's called the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, is actually starting to support the approach of universal trauma screening in healthcare. So you look at, actually one thing I didn't mention is in terms of adult survivors and even children, and Darlene, as you mentioned, you know, if we don't know we don't know what we don't know, we think the treatment is just what everybody endures, we are more susceptible to re-victimization. So
Right.
toll, and there's also a financial toll with re-victimization, and because of money, you know, sometimes the money is what gets the attention. It is, you know, the cost of you know, behavioral health services that are needed to support, you know, support some of our individuals. It's incarceration, reincarceration, it's missed work, right? So it's all those things are also big money items, and so and what go where the money is, some of the high ticket money items getting attention of some of these organizations. We also have hospitals, a lot of hospitals. For example, the Mayo Clinic, you may or may not have heard of the Mayo Clinic. They actually have incorporated trauma screening in their electronic medical records. And Mayo is one of the, you know, clinics that is usually regarded as one of the more kind of cutting edge, so that they're leading by example, which is good. Glad to hear this. There are now hospitals that are starting to implement trauma screenings in ER and medical settings. And while someone that's referred to a mental health specialist is screened for trauma, not everybody gets referred to a mental health specialist. So really getting the front line, which is the primary care, to actually screen for trauma. So at the doctor's appointment, at the well checks, at the physicals, at the even drop in, I'm sick. I don't know if anybody's recently gone to the doctor, taking their child, but a lot of healthcare organizations and pediatricians' offices will now screen children for depression and anxiety, but a lot are taking it a step further and screening for trauma. So there is some hope there. And
I noticed I noticed it. Let me elaborate. That's something I noticed when you said that about hospitals, because last time, well, last few times I've been to the emergency room, either from just by accident, even by bumped my head against something, or or got a cold, or worse than a cold, close to a flu or whatever. Every time now they screen me and ask me, "Do you feel safe at home? Is there anybody there that's hurting you?" They automatically ask me that, and I'm like, "Wow!" Now they're starting to ask a question that's not even related to my injury or anything, but they're still screening to make sure a person, if you don't feel safe there, here's your way out, possibly with seeing that doctor. You know what I'm saying? Getting a woman help if you're being violated or victimized at home, and I think that's wonderful.
I think it's great. I think it's exactly what we need. So there's hope. I'm glad you
It's
experienced.
necessary.
It is. It sort of relates, and not to bring it back to myself, but as I mentioned, when I was 46 years old, my primary care provider noticed something in me. There wasn't an official, he didn't eyeball, trauma screening. There was an official one, but had it not been for that basically, eyeball trauma screening, I would not have been referred, and I would not have, started a process of really addressing a lot of trauma. So I'm really glad to hear that you're getting that question. I don't know if I've been asked that question, but that is a great question that needs to be asked to children and to all adults. I think that's basically it. So I think there's an increased focus on it. I know that a lot of the money, like I said, a lot of the money, the cost of missed work and a lot of the basically ramifications of individuals who have suffered trauma that have these some other symptoms that cause lack of the ability to work or the need for assistance. The money is also driving some of the decisions to do this universal. I think that's a good place to go, but I think that we need to be even more. We need to get some of Darlene's fire. We need to get fired up, and we need to start really advocating for this. Fighting for this. We're fighting for our children. We're trying to keep our children safe. We should be, in my opinion, I'm fighting to have every single child, the minute that they're a newborn baby and they're being seen for their checkups or in the hospital, I want them to be screened for trauma, not only physically, but emotionally. I know that, you can't talk to a 1-year-old, but you can definitely acknowledge and notice a 1-year-old's behavior. We talked about the behavioral signs of a child that's being mistreated. I want teenagers, elementary schoolers, middle schoolers, high schoolers, college age students. There's so many students going to their college health center for emotional support for depression, anxiety over school and over interpersonal relationships and over stress. They should be screened for trauma as well. We should be screening adults. We should be screening everyone. And trauma doesn't discriminate in terms of age. So what we haven't talked about today, Darlene, is also elder abuse. We should also
Right.
we should be screening everybody. But I think in order to have that happen, we need to be asking for it. We need to be writing to our local congressman. We need to be writing to our legislature. We need to be, in our customer satisfaction surveys when we go to the doctor, writing in the comments, screening for trauma. We need to be asking for it.
Look what Necessary Evil wrote you. And there's 2 parts. That's his first part.
Okay. No,
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. We just thought everybody had a crappy life. I also had a screening years ago at several different times, and they used the MMPI. You heard of that?
Yes. But once
Well, they told me there's no pass or fail on it, but every time they told me I failed it, I was one screwed up individual. And I'm like, you're just telling me that? I mean, but yeah, I mean, one question might have a certain word that's not going to trigger me, okay, and it can mean the same meaning. But then here's another question turned in a different language, and there's the word that really gets to me. You know what I mean? It's like, ah.
well, I mean, there is that, and I can see how some of the questions can be triggering or traumatic. And I know, there's a fine line there.
Hey, Cash, good to see you.
Exactly. But I think, as I mentioned, we can use anger constructively as energy to help fuel, to do something, to make change, right? To create change, to create awareness. And Darlene, I know we've talked a lot about a completely different sexual abuse and sexual abuse survivors, but I was doing a little bit of research on just the origin of sexual abuse victims and the statutes of limitations, right? In terms
Right.
of our states now have lifted the statutes of limitations for survivors of sexual assault so that they can actually formally pursue their the process of lawsuits. And but what's interesting is it started with one person, I believe her name is Diana Pearl, who
And Cash is telling you hello.
she made a video, a YouTube video that went viral, and then a petition was formed, and the petition got enough signatures to take legislation. So it was one person. Now, maybe a lot of people out there have the thought, but it was one person who took their experience and they put their energy from that experience, I won't say anger, into doing something. They posted a video, which became a petition, which got enough signatures to be taken to legislation. So don't think that you won't make a difference. We can all make a difference if we take action and do something. So I would say use that anger. So I appreciate this opportunity to come on the show, Darlene, because we're talking about trauma screening for children and for anyone to screen for maltreatment. And this is something, people are hearing our voices, and we are creating awareness. And I think that this is just a wonderful platform, and thank you for that. But we're doing something.
Yeah, you got different other people that's telling you hello. Necessary Evil said hello to you, and Cash said hello to you.
Hello. Yeah, you see my name. Oh.
Yeah, sometime Necessary Evil, aka Charles, has got one heck of a story that he needs to tell, and I hope he comes on here soon and tells it. Um, so he said that he got the best score, which is really the worst score. He made the 10.
You made the 10. That sucks that you made the 10. It's one of those tests that you don't want to score well. You don't even want to get 1 out of 10. So many have 1 out of 10. Many have 1 out of 10. But yes, I'm sorry you got a great score. That stinks. And that's an understatement.
Can I ask you a question? What would you say to people when you hear so many people that say, well, everybody wants me to stay quiet? What do I do? And we know the answer to that. You know what I'm saying? But they're bothering me. They call me a liar. Nobody believes me. What do you say to somebody that does not believe when you go to tell them about this percent thing happening?
Well, I say 2 things. Number 1, that's hard. So don't think that it's not hard. That is hard, because what's really hard about it is it invalidates our own lived experience. It invalidates what we've been through. So don't silence me. And it's hard for the people that you know and that you care about tell you to be quiet and that they don't believe you, they don't want you to speak. It's really, really hard. Here's what I would say. It took me a lot of work. I had to do a lot of work. And I'm thankful I did the work. But what I realized is that if I wanted to heal or to go through the healing process, I had to decide what side was I going to be on. Was I going to be on the silent side, which enabled abuse to continue, or was it going to be on the loud side? I was going to be on the loud side. And I was willing, and this is hard, I would say, you're to know that you may be standing alone in your family or amongst your friends that know what happened. If you're willing to accept that, and not be bothered by speak. I would say speak. I would say expect that no one's going to, that those that want to keep it silent, rarely, you could talk to a lot of different survivors. Rarely do people say, oh, you know what? I wanted to really keep it quiet. We did everything we could to keep it quiet, but you know what? You were right. We really should be loud about it. That really, it's, don't expect that to happen, but it doesn't mean that it isn't worth it, because it's hard work. It's hard to stand for truth and stand for what's right. If it was easy, everybody could do it. It's hard, but it's important work. And for me, I say do it because I need to do it for that little girl that was
Right.
so horrifically hurt. You know, I need to get, that's her justice, is that I will deal with the fallout of people not standing with me that should be standing with me, or people telling me that I'm telling lies, that I'm making it all therapist in my head. I know what the truth is, and my protection of her and validating her is stronger than anything that anybody would say. So I would say, you know, I know it's hard, and I know it's a lonely place to be when you're the only one speaking out. But I would say standing up for the cause and lending your voice to something bigger than you are is also a feeling of hope and a feeling of actually taking action and doing something that's also very liberating. And lastly, and I can't just answer it in one sentence, just like Darlene, those are your people. That is your community of support.
Right.
A community of adult survivors or of survivors of trauma or child abuse or sexual abuse that have spoken out. They get it. They've walked in your shoes. You will find you're not alone. You will. I have found so much inspiration and confidence and really just reinvigoration anytime. And I still have doubts. Trust me, I still have. You know, it's hard. It's not an. It's an ongoing process, but go back to your community. There is a community. Find your community. They're totally out there. Darlene, hook up with Darlene. Hook up with me. In terms of, on the internet, don't underestimate the value of that support. But it is. I feel for you. It is tough. But knowing that it was hard and it still is hard, I wouldn't, because like Darlene and we have to give this to the within us that work.
You got that right. I really appreciate to hear some love that they're giving you. We're giving lots of them will give you love and stuff like that and support to you for you being brave and everything.
I mean, gosh, I wish it was easy, because logic would dictate that the people that were there with you when you were hurt and that were there and saw it, logic would say they would concur, right? They
Right.
would be able to dispute that. But unfortunately, there's something within the family or within a unit. There's this, I almost say it feels like a cult. And I hate to use that word. I'm not trying to use it
Yeah.
loosely. But I felt like there's this cult of those that are on the silent side. And you're either with us or you're not. And if you're not with us, you are so not with us. And that's, they're the only people in the universe that know the truth too, So
Yeah.
it's have to be strong. Have to be strong, and you have to find your people that do support you.
Yeah, Cash just said something very important. I was
Yeah.
never personally abused in that way, but know some that were, and a few of them, it took its toll by them taking their lives.
Yeah. I'm sorry. That's the pain the pain of living with it is almost, I don't know about you, Darlene, but when I was going through the healing process and actually processing it, the pain of what happened, I didn't know if I would survive it. I didn't know if I would survive it, the anguish of just having to, finally through it. But had I not, I don't think I'd be here. Because the pain,
Yes.
get it up and out, and it is. So I'm so sorry that you know people that have been in that much pain at the end of their lives, and unfortunately, it's not unusual.
And we want to thank you so much. You're strong and you're getting the word out there. I'm grateful for you. Necessary Evil, aka Charles, he said I became the lone screw that wouldn't shut till they all saw I was telling the truth.
And the thing is, too, and Darlene, you and I about this in your story and my story, but typically when there is someone who's an abuser or there's an environment, we're usually not singled out. We may get it worse, but typically
Right.
when you and you finally do speak out, even if it's in an adult, you do give permission to the other people that were growing up with you in your environment. You do give them permission to also come forward. So there is some value in that, and that if someone wishes to go down the road of the healing process, you've you've opened that door to start to start the dialogue and to actually accept it. I think it's really hard to be the first one.
Right.
Darlene,
That's kind of just like what you're saying. Cash is saying something similar right there. You see what he said? He said, never be the bystander, vulnerable, neither stronger to help them. That's basically what you're saying when you just made that statement.
yeah, exactly. Because I'm saying it again. The silence is nefarious. The silence of keeping that is nefarious, as nefarious, I think, as the suppression is nefarious, and it's a impactful as abuse. Silence is abuse because it enables it to continue. Silence means silencing abuse is neglect. That's neglect. Neglecting is not protecting. Silence is a way to protect the abuser and the behavior. That's why I said like there was just a line. I could be silent. I could be silent. I could be silent. Or I could speak the truth, and I wasn't going to participate in the cycle of it.
I wanted to ask y'all how many times, and I've fell victim to this at times too. I would see a kid walking by that looked like he was so dirty or something like that, and I might pass him, but I don't want no bearing with him, just a filthy whatever. I'm just talking about when I was a kid, okay? I just looked and said it's just a dirty. No, when you go back and look at it, it's like when you grow and everything, right? You know not to pass that judgment. Look at that kid. He might have been abused so terribly, and that might have been all that he was allowed to wear or whatever. You know what I'm saying? And I had judged him unfairly as a kid myself when I just looked that way. But I felt sorry for him too at the same time, and I was like, what's he going through, right? And I thought, well, he might be going through what I'm going through. But the bad thing, sometimes we as kids, we're conditioned to look the opposite way a lot of times. We're going through enough without handing out, but we need to open our eyes and see. And you see this kid walking, or even a grown adult that's walking down the store, down the road, and he's homeless and everything. Majority of people that are homeless are victims of these abuses.
Yeah.
That's having trouble coming to terms and making it.
Yes.
Now you survive at a pure spot. Like that necessary evil. Yeah, when I had heard my stepmom when she told me as a teenager, I wish you would go ahead and kill yourself. Then I started all of a sudden having pure spite, like, I don't want to kill myself to make you happy. So I stayed alive for spite.
You had that spirit.
The what?
Spirit.
Yeah. Used to, I would do anything she wanted to please her, basically, but not the sexual. And I would not, when she didn't want me to worship, I still snuck out of the house and worship. Okay, you couldn't take those two things away from me. Okay, everything else, you could beat me, whatever. I'm okay. Try to be okay. But don't do these certain things.
Exactly. Exactly. But the great part about your story, Darlene, is that you survived. You didn't kill yourself to spite your, stepmother, but now, you're in a place where you know that you are of value and you live because you're valuable and because you're loved and because you love yourself. You live your life for the right, for reasons that are true, that have integrity, that show you, your self love, because there's a journey there, and in terms of healing, where we have to learn to love ourselves, and you love yourself enough to live, to
And
know.
and it's kind of funny because on that property where they had the satanic worship, the cult meetings, kids in cages on that property, guess what's being built there? A church. It's kind of oxymoronic. Satan worship to church worship. It's kind of like wow. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Well, actually, that reminds me of something. I was listening to a podcast about, and it sort of relates to the question you asked about, you know, standing alone and speaking the truth. And this is also something that I try and remember. But see, Darlene, you prayed there, you planted some seeds, a long time ago, right? You used the home as a place of worship, not as a place for the devil. And anyway, I
Right.
read regarding the question too about, you know, it's really important that we just focus on the seeds that we plant and we don't worry as much about the harvest. You plant enough seeds, just keep planting seeds. We can't really control the harvest. And I don't really pay too much attention, but I'm all about planting the seeds because that's what I can do. Um, and the harvest is more about what everybody else thinks, everybody else's reaction, kind of like the customer satisfaction survey. But I'm more focusing on, I just need to plant the seeds and do the right thing. Those are the seeds that I'm planting. I can't worry about what the harvest looks like. Because I think if you plant enough seeds, you keep planting them, you're going to have a harvest.
Yeah. And it's really interesting how you draw back and thinking now, like, how things had changed versus, I mean, like you had said earlier too, that there's a leeway how the other people that were abused per se, around per se people, whatever. And when you speak up, that gives them the avenue to speak up too. Well, right when I first started speaking up, my brother had said in a comment, don't act like you were the only one that was abused. And so I wrote back and I said, I share my story and it's up to you to share your story. Okay. But then he ended up changing for the worst and saying, how dare you not look at daddy as a hero? I said, I can't look at somebody as a hero that molests and rapes children. I just cannot. Hey, Parky. Good to see y'all. So that's why I had to disown him as a brother. See, that's what I'm saying. You hear this negativity for them. Why would you want to keep something negative that keeps beating you down when you're trying to rise above it? You need to get rid of those people out of your life. And I
Yeah.
did by abandoning them out of my life and shutting them out of my life, okay?
And what I'm thinking about that, what you just remarked upon your brother, and I'm thinking, well, initially he acknowledged, and
Yeah, he
then
initially did it. I still got the text saved to another computer over there. Everybody would want to get it out as proof. And it's like,
fortunate that you led by example. You did the right thing. He went there initially, and then he didn't. You can always hope. You know, I always think you're never too old. It's never too late. Anybody can be enlightened at any age. I always hope, that people will decide to, move forward with the healing process and with disclosing these things. That's what I do. I just hope that they will. But it's an
exactly.
brother just hasn't done it, didn't do it, may never do it, but you're doing it. You're planting the seeds, and that's like the harvest. It's like, well, he might not sprout. He just might not sprout, but you just keep planting.
And now people say we do this for attention. Before, I would say no, we don't do it for attention. Now we're bringing it for attention because we want people to understand that this happens too often. We're bringing it to the limelight, like do something about it because it isn't just me that this happened to. This happens to so many other people who might not be as lucky to even be able to escape and survive it, you know?
Yeah, I can just remark that I that this is not good attention. I mean,
Yeah, it's they threw us in it. It's what I usually had said. They threw me in it. I would not be saying nothing about it now, that kind of stuff. But, I was thrown into it. You put me here.
yeah. Sorry, I'm gonna have to go plug in my. So I put my video on. Yeah,
Okay.
this is not attention that is. I think there's some more constructive ways, positive ways to get attention. This is not. I'm sorry, being abused as a child or sexually abused. This is not something that I don't think a lot of people really want to advertise.
No,
Um,
it's really about awareness.
it is. It is. I mean, this is not a point of pride in terms of having gone through these things, but it is a point of awareness. Absolutely. Uh,
Exactly, Cash.
yeah, and I've heard that mindset that, oh, attention grabbing, or this is not easy to. This is why we repress these memories. This is not easy to disclose.
No, it's
Um,
not. We know
there,
that we're going to get backlash no matter where.
and I would also say, now that we're on the subject, it's very rare that a child will make up a story of sexual abuse. It's not a usual occurrence. Believe children that talk about maltreatment, any form of maltreatment, sexual maltreatment. This is not, they do not make these things up normally. It's very, very rare. Very rare. I know sometimes we don't want to believe it as adults. I know that's hard. It's hard to accept. If we hear a child talk about their experience or mention their experience, so I know we have a hard time hearing it, but children don't. Rarely do they lie about being sexually abused or abused. Rarely, if
Yeah.
ever. Rarely.
And you're right there, Cash. If this helps one person, even if you make millions, it's worth it.
Totally.
He said, anybody got any wood chipper fuel?
Well, to the person, that asked a question about, speaking about it, and this is just, I think that as adult survivors, when you've been abused, you have to realize that speaking the abuse, you hope you help somebody else, but also you learn, if you just help yourself heal, that's also, that's something. To me, it counts for something.
Exactly. You did such a great job in coming here and bringing awareness to this. Just let me know next time you'll come in here and bring another topic in here for us to discuss if you like to. Do you have any closing words? I really like what Cash is saying to you. He's saying, like, awareness is imperative, awareness is education,
It is.
and talking publicly helps.
It does. It does. The only thing I want to say is please, please, please advocate for trauma screening. Please, please lend your voice. Your voice matters. It just takes one voice to start the movement. One voice can have a big impact. The other thing I do want to say thank you to Darlene for having me on and just for building this amazing platform that you have, Darlene, to bring about awareness. I'm just, I'm in awe and inspired by you every day. And I just want to say thanks.
I want to say thank you so much because, you've been very good, when you had interviewed different people over there at NASCA on the Blog Talk when Blog Talk Radio was a thing. So you have got a good personality and a good moral background, and it's kind of hard to find other survivors that actually think a lot like the same kind of mindset. Even there's some people, but a lot of us have we understand common ground about the pain and the difficulties and the mental anguish that it does, But it's so many still do not want to speak up. Is what I'm in reference to.
Agreed. Well, thank you. And I agree. And um, you're building a community. We built a community. Darlene, in your platform, you're building a community. It's a safe place to speak up. And you've given people that choice and that avenue. So we need more people talking.
Yes, ma'am, we do. Well, lots of love to you, and we really do appreciate you, and we hope you do get to come back. And we are sorry that you had to endure the pain that you endured as well. But we are glad that you are advocating, helping advocate to get this awareness out there.
Thank you, Darlene. And thank you to everybody that participated and asked questions, comments. I really appreciate you.
Yeah, there's instead of saying something so horrible and true, they wish they have a best first. And somebody said talking out loud is just therapy in itself. Recording validates it for me. They're saying thank you to you as well.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Much love.
Much love.
Take care, everybody, and God bless y'all. If y'all don't believe, I still say bless y'all. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye bye.